The river that curled around Kui Village had no beginning and no end, or at least that was what the elders said. To the villagers, it had always been there, long before their fathers were born, long before the great Iroko trees stretched their arms toward the heavens. It moved with a patient calm, carrying secrets on its back, secrets of fish darting like arrows beneath the surface, secrets of moonlight gliding across still water, secrets of songs the women hummed while washing clothes at its edge. Kue's life beat to the rhythm of that river. At dawn, the farmers marched to the fields, their hoes balanced across their shoulders, their voices calling out greetings that echoed down the narrow footpaths. The air smelled of damp earth and palm oil, of wood smoke rising from clay kitchens where mothers stirred steaming pots of yam porridge before sending their children to school. Children ran barefoot through the sand, their laughter piercing the stillness of morning. The older boys carried fishing baskets, while the girls balanced calabashes of water on their heads, their necks straight as bamboo stalks. It was a village of rhythms, of small duties done faithfully, of hands hardened by work and hearts softened by community. In the evenings, when the sun sank low and spilled its golden blood across the fields, the villagers gathered under the ancient Iroko tree in the square. It was here they shared news, told stories of the ancestors, and resolved disputes. Under its vast branches, the world seemed smaller, safer, and predictable. Kuje was not rich, not by any outsider's measure, but the people believed themselves blessed. They had land to farm, water to drink, children to raise, and festivals to keep the gods happy. What more could life offer? But even in a village where life felt secular and unchanging, there were always eyes that looked beyond the boundaries of forest and river. Among them was a girl named Folake, though most called her Fake in the affectionate, shortened way villagers softened names. She was the second daughter of Ojo the carpenter and Momaya Tond, a woman known for the sweetness of her voice when she sang in church and the sharpness of her tongue when a child misbehaved. Fake was not the most beautiful girl in Kuje. There were others with lighter skin, others with fuller hips, others with laughter that made young men trip over their own feet. But she carried something rare, a sharp, curious mind that did not settle easily into silence. Where other girls quietly bent their heads to chores, Fake asked questions. Why did the river flow one way and not the other? Why did their fathers cut trees but never plant new ones? Why must girls learn only to cook and sweep when boys were free to fish, farm, and roam? At 17, she was tall and slender, her skin the shade of roasted palm kernel, her eyes bright with the kind of hunger that frightened some elders. She helped her mother in the mornings, teaching her younger siblings to count and sing when chores were done. She lingered at the feet of the old storytellers, not only listening but memorizing their words until she could retell them with her own flair. Children gathered around her at dusk, choosing her voice over the drone of crickets. Still, in Kuje, dreams larger than farming or carpentry were seen as dangerous. Education was tolerated only to the point where it did not disturb the natural order. Boys might be sent to secondary school if their families could manage the fees, girls, rarely. A girl's place, after all, was to marry, bear children, and keep her husband's home. And yet, Fake's father, perhaps softened by her persistence, allowed her to stay in school longer than most. By the time she finished her secondary education, she was already different. She could speak English more fluently than the teachers themselves. She could read the Bible aloud in church without stumbling. She even wrote letters for other villagers, carrying their words across paper when they needed to reach family in distant towns. But in Kuje, once school ended, life folded back into its old patterns. There were no universities, no scholarships, no roads paved with opportunity. And so, on the surface, Fake remained what she had always been, the carpenter's daughter, the girl with restless eyes who fetched water from the river at dawn and pounded yam with her mother at dusk. But within her, something stirred, a longing, an unformed vision of a world she had never seen but felt must exist. On certain nights, she would stand at the riverbank after everyone else had gone, watching the moon sketch silver lines across the water. She imagined that the river, if followed long enough, might lead her to that other world. A world beyond the whispering trees, beyond the yam fields, beyond Kuje itself. What she did not know was that her wish would soon be granted, and in ways she could never have foreseen. For the city was coming to Kuje, and with it, a test that would change her life, and the life of the entire village, forever. Morning in Kuje began with the roosters, loud and insistent, as though they owned the right to wake the sun. Their crowing mingled with the distant beating of pestles against mortars, women pounding yam flour or pepper into fiery paste. Smoke curled from mud chimneys, rising to meet the pale dawn sky, while children's voices, half laughter, half complaints, filled the footpaths as they hurried to fetch water before school. Fake's mornings were always full. By the time her siblings rubbed the sleep from their eyes, she was already at the river with a calabash balanced on her head, her bare feet sinking into the cool sand. She enjoyed these moments of solitude, when the air was still damp and the sky stretched endlessly above her. The water reflected her face like a mirror, and sometimes she bent low over it, whispering questions to her own reflection: what lies beyond the forest? What would it feel like to walk streets made of stone instead of dust? Would they laugh at my accent? Would they even know my name? But once back at home, her world was smaller, contained within her family's compound. Mama Yatan's voice carried like a whip. Fake. Don't let that pot burn. Fake, have you swept the yard? Fake, you think the food will cook itself? She obeyed, smiling despite her mother's sharp tongue. She understood the rhythm of her mother's love, buried under scolding, but warm and steady as the earth itself. And when her chores were done, Fake would gather her younger siblings under the mango tree, telling them folktales she had memorized. Her voice was soft but commanding, weaving stories of the tortoise who always tried to trick the other animals, or of hunters who wrestled with spirits in the forest. The children loved her stories more than anything. They clapped, shouted, and laughed until their small bellies shook. Even the neighbors' children sometimes crept over to listen, their eyes wide in the dusk. But Fake was not content to only retell the tales. She began to change them, just a little, giving the women in her stories louder voices, making the girls clever enough to outsmart even the trickster tortoise. She never admitted this to the elders, for they guarded tradition like treasure, but deep inside she felt a secret thrill. She was reshaping the world through words. Her father, Oje the carpenter, adored her in his quiet way. He was not a man of many words, but whenever he saw her writing on scraps of paper or reciting lines from her school books, he would nod, a faint smile softening his weathered face. This one, he would sometimes tell his friends, was born with a brain too big for this village. Still, her life was bound by the same rules as every girl's life in Kuje. Market days were spent helping her mother sell palm oil or groundnuts, calling out to customers with her bright voice. Festival days meant braiding her hair with cowrie shells and joining the other maidens in dance, her feet moving in rhythm with the drums, her laughter carrying on the wind. Evenings were filled with the smell of roasting maize, the buzz of cicadas, and the gentle warmth of lanterns glowing through palm leaf walls. It was a simple life, a safe life, and for the most part, Fake was happy. She loved her people, their songs, their laughter, their endless resilience. She loved the way her grandmother's wrinkled hands traced stories on her skin when she spoke of the ancestors. She loved the sense that everyone in Kuje belonged to everyone else, that no one ever truly walked alone. And yet, there was always that question, that whisper, that small ache that refused to leave her chest. Sometimes, when she was alone at night, she dreamed of standing on a road that stretched endlessly forward, its surface smooth and shining like the river after rain. At the far end of the road, lights glittered like 1,000 fireflies, calling to her, pulling her. She would wake from these dreams with her heart pounding, unsure whether it was fear or excitement that made her tremble. Her mother dismissed such things. A girl's dream is her husband's house, Mama Yoton would say. What more do you want? You'll marry, you'll cook, you'll raise children, and you'll find joy in that. Don't let foolish ideas turn your head. But Fake wanted more, though she could not yet name it. She wanted to see beyond Kuje, to learn what other people knew, to taste the flavors of life not sold in their market. She wanted her world to be bigger than her mother's cooking pot and her father's workshop. It was an innocence of dreams, beautiful, fragile, untested. She believed that whatever lay beyond the forest must be golden, that knowledge itself must be a gift without curse, that the world could only be kind to those who sought it with pure hearts. She could not yet know that innocence was a thread, and that one day, the world would pull on it until the whole cloth of her life began to unravel. But for now, Fake smiled in the sunlight, her laughter ringing across the compound, her eyes shining with the light of dreams not yet broken. It was a Saturday afternoon, bright and unremarkable, when Kuje first saw the city. Not the city itself, of course. No bus had suddenly appeared to whisk anyone away, no concrete roads had cut through their yam fields overnight. But for the villagers, the arrival of the city came in the form of young people, students from a university miles away, who traveled into Kuje for what they called an excursion. The news of their coming reached the village 2 days before, carried by a lanky boy who had overheard men talking at the roadside canteen. By the next morning, it was on every tongue. They are coming with their cameras. They will write about us in their books. They said they want to see how we live. And so, when the white bus finally rolled into Kuje, groaning and spitting dust, the whole village gathered to meet it. Children abandoned their chores and chased after it, squealing with delight. Women wiped their hands on wrappers, shading their eyes to catch a glimpse. Even the elders rose from their woven mats beneath the iroko tree, curiosity outweighing age. The bus door opened with a hiss, and out stepped the strangers. They looked different. Not in their skin, they were mostly sons and daughters of the same soil, but in everything else. Their clothes clung in bright, fashionable fabrics, their hair styled in ways Kuje girls had never dared attempt. Around their necks hung small shining devices that clicked and flashed, cameras. Some carried sleek notebooks and pens. One tall boy had a silver watch that glinted like a piece of stolen sunlight. Their voices carried in English, smooth and confident, flowing like watered-down polished stone. They laughed loudly, unashamedly, as though the world belonged to them. The villagers stared, first in silence, then in murmurs. "See their shoes," one woman gasped, clutching her wrapper tighter. "Shoes that never touch farm mud," another replied. "And look at the girls, see how they walk, as if the ground should bow." The chief of Kuje, old Chief Alobi, shuffled forward with his staff, his wrapper tied in neat folds around his waist. He welcomed them in a booming voice, calling them children of knowledge, and inviting them to sit in the shade. The students, eager for photographs, followed happily. For hours, Kuje became a theater. The students toured the farms, taking pictures of women pounding yam and men sharpening hoes. They leaned over the river, exclaiming at the woven baskets fishermen used. They scribbled in their notebooks while children sang songs in Yoruba, clapping their hands in rhythm. At the marketplace, they tasted roasted maize and suyo, laughing at the spiciness, and paid with crisp notes that made the traders' eyes widen. Fake watched it all with a strange mixture of awe and unease. She had seen travelers before, traders passing through, government workers in dusty jeeps, but these students were different. They were not just visitors. They seemed to belong to another world, a world she had only glimpsed in her imagination. They carried themselves like people who knew more than the river, more than the Iroko, more than Kuje itself could ever teach. When one of the city girls paused to compliment Fake's braided hair, she blushed so fiercely that she almost dropped her calabash. Their eyes met for only a second, but in that moment Fake felt something shift inside her. She wanted, not just wanted, but needed, to be like them. To wear shoes that never touch farm mud. To laugh in English without fear of stumbling. To move through the world with such certainty, as though the earth itself bent in greeting. By evening, When the bus roared back to life and carried the students away, the villagers remained restless. They spoke of little else for days. They live in a place where light does not go off at night. They said their library is bigger than our church. One girl told me she has never fetched water from a river in her life. Some were impressed. Others were jealous. A few scoffed, insisting that city life made people proud and lazy. But no one could deny it. Kuje had seen a vision of something larger than itself, and the image would not fade. As for Folake, that night she lay awake, staring at the rafters of her family's hut. The river's voice drifted through the window, but she no longer heard it the same way. The students' laughter rang louder in her ears. Their confidence had carved a wound in her innocence, filling it with longing. She whispered into the dark, as though confessing a secret to the night. I will go. One day, I will go where they came from. What she did not know was that her whisper would not remain only a dream. Kuje itself would soon gather around her, pressing her toward a future brighter and darker than anything she had imagined. When something unusual stirred Kuje, the people did not argue in whispers behind closed doors. They gathered under the Iroko tree. Its wide arms stretched over the village square like the roof of a great cathedral, and its roots twisted deep into the earth as though they held the entire community together. For generations, decisions had been made there, marriages arranged, disputes settled, punishments declared, blessings pronounced. And so, only a week after the students' visit, the drums called the villagers to the square. Men came with their wrappers tied firm around their waists, women with babies on their backs, children running barefoot to sit in the sand. Even the elders who rarely left their mats were carried on stools, their eyes sharp despite the dimness of age. The chief, Alabi, stood at the center, leaning on his carved staff. His voice, when it rose, carried across the murmuring crowd. You have seen with your own eyes, he began, that there is a world beyond our river. Our children who visited us were students of the city. They spoke like kings and queens, they carried themselves with power. Tell me, shall Kuje remain hidden in the forest while the rest of the world marches forward? The crowd stirred, voices breaking out. Some nodded eagerly. Others muttered darkly. A farmer called out, Chief, our fathers farmed this land and fed their families without city schools. Do we now say they lived wrongly? Another replied before the chief could answer, but the world has changed. Do you not see? Those students live with light in their homes while we light palm oil lamps. They read books larger than our church Bible. Must Kuje always be left behind? The arguments clashed like cymbals. Some shouted that knowledge brought pride, that city ways would make their children forget their roots. Others countered that ignorance was a greater shame, that the gods would not punish those who sought wisdom. The chief lifted his staff, and the noise stilled. Listen. I am old. I have seen wars, famine, harvest, deaths, and births. But never before have I seen our children so restless, so eager. We must not close their eyes. Let us choose one child to go to the city for higher learning. One child who will carry Kuje's name into that place of light and return to us with knowledge. Just one. The square went silent. One child. One chance. The murmuring began again, but this time it carried sharper edges, envy, ambition, calculation. Every family wanted it to be theirs. Fathers puffed out their chest. Mothers whispered their children's virtues. Boys jostled, imagining themselves in shining shoes, returning with the swagger of the city. Girls lowered their eyes, though their hearts burned with the same hunger. Then came the question that cracked the square open. Should it be a boy or a girl? A ripple of unease passed through the crowd. Tradition said boys. Boys inherited land, boys carried the family name, boys sat among the elders. Girls, though precious, were destined to marry into another household, carrying their gifts away with them. Why waste such an opportunity on a girl? An elder with a beard as white as cotton spoke, "If we send a boy, his children will remain in Kuje. If we send a girl, she will marry and her children will belong to another family. It is our duty to think of legacy." But Mama Yatond, Fake's mother, stood boldly, her wrapper knotted tight at her waist. Her voice, sharp as a pestle against mortar, cut through the air. "And is knowledge only for the sons of men? Have our daughters not carried this village on their backs? Who fetches the water? Who cooks the yam? Who raises the children? If a girl is the brightest among us, shall we waste her light because of fear? Will wisdom not bless Kuje, whether it comes from a man or a woman?" Her words drew gasps. Some women clapped their hands in agreement, their voices rising in support. The men frowned, shifting uncomfortably. The debate grew heated, but slowly, the mamas began to lean in one direction. Everyone knew it in their hearts, though few dared say it. The brightest child in Kuje was Folake. She had outshone the boys in school. She could read letters for traders and write them too. She carried herself with discipline, never wasting words, never shaming her parents. And after the city students left, everyone had seen the way her eyes burned, the way she asked questions as though her soul was on fire. One by one, voices began to say her name. Quietly at first, then louder. "Fake. Let it be Fake." Her father, Ojo the carpenter, sat stiff as wood, pride and fear warring in his chest. He wanted to argue, to protect his daughter from the unknown, but he also knew she was the only one who could bear the weight of this choice. Finally, Chief Alabi raised his staff once more. "Then it is settled. Kuje shall send Folake, daughter of Ojo the carpenter, to the city. She will carry our name, our pride, and our hopes. May the gods bless her path." The crowd erupted, some cheering, some muttering in bitterness. Fake, seated near her mother, felt her chest tighten. Her name had been thrown into the air like a stone, and now the whole village's eyes were on her. Her mother's hand squeezed hers, firm and unyielding. Her father's eyes glistened with a pride he dared not voice. And Fake herself. She was trembling, not from fear alone, but from the dizzying weight of destiny. That night, as drums echoed in the square and villagers celebrated their decision, Fake lay awake on her raffia mat. The stars above seemed brighter than ever, as though the heavens themselves were watching. The village had chosen her. Kuje had given her wings. But no one had told her what it meant to fly. Once the decision was made under the Iroko tree, Kuje moved as though a festival had been declared. The air buzzed with activity. For the first time in living memory, the village had chosen a child to send beyond its boundaries, not as a trader or a bride, but as a bearer of knowledge. In a place where everyone's hands were hardened by labor and their pockets lined only with coins, this was no small task. School in the city required more than dreams, it required money. And so, the village did what it always did in times of need, they came together. Every morning, women brought small gifts to Ojo the carpenter's compound. A gourd of palm oil. A basket of dried fish. A measure of beans tied carefully in cloth. Men returned from their farms with tubers of yam, cassava, or a few naira folded tightly in hand. Hunters donated strips of dried bushmeat, their leathery scent filling the air. Even children, who owned little more than pebbles and slings, offered what they could, sometimes a single coin, sometimes a mango plucked from the highest tree. No gift was too small. The piles grew, and with them, the weight of the villagers' expectations. "Remember us when you reach the city," they told Fake. "Don't forget Kuje. Learn well. Come back and teach our children." The chief himself arrived with a leather bag containing money collected from the Council of Elders. He placed it solemnly in Ojo's hands. "This is for the journey," he said. "Use it wisely. And let the girl walk in dignity, for she now carries all our names." Preparations went beyond food and money. Aunties and cousins gathered in the compound to sew new clothes for her. The hum of treadle sewing machines filled the afternoons as wrappers were cut into skirts and blouses, and soft Ankara cloth was tailored into dresses fit for the city. She must not look like a bush girl when she arrives, they said. Let them see that Kui has beauty too. Fake's hair was carefully braided with cowries and beads, each plait neat and deliberate, as though woven with prayer. Her mother bought her a small box, an old, dented tin box from the market, but polished until it shone. Into it went all the treasures she owned, 2 pairs of sandals, her new clothes, a Bible, and a few notebooks. Every night, her father sat silently by the fire, watching her. He had never traveled beyond the neighboring villages. The thought of his daughter stepping into a world he could not imagine both filled him with pride and stabbed at him with dread. Sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, he reached for her hand and held it longer than usual, his careless palm rough against hers. Folake, he whispered once, when the others had gone to sleep. His voice was heavy, thick with words he struggled to shape. The city, it is not like here. People there are quick. Their hearts are not as soft as a villager's. Remember who you are. Remember your father's name. Don't let them break you. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Yes, Baba. Her mother's advice was sharper. Keep your legs closed. The city is full of men who will smile at you today and throw you away tomorrow. Don't eat everything they offer. Don't trust every hand that reaches out. And when you are afraid, pray. Mommy, I will, Fake promised, though inside her chest her heart was a tangle of fear and excitement. The night before her departure, the village gathered for a farewell feast. Lanterns lit the square, their glow dancing across eager faces. Drums throbbed, voices rose in songs that spoke of journeys, blessings, and protection. Fake was seated in the center, wrapped in new cloth, her hair shining, her eyes lowered in humility. Children circled her, clapping and singing her name. She felt as though she were being crowned queen of a land she had not yet seen. Pride swelled in her chest, but it was a heavy pride, weighted with responsibility. Kuje was pouring itself into her, every prayer, every yam, every coin. She was not living as only Ojo's daughter. She was living as Kuje's daughter. That night, sleep refused to visit her. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of crickets and distant drums. The river's voice drifted faintly into the compound, as though whispering farewell. At dawn, she would cross the boundary of her world. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. The morning of her departure dawned slowly, as if the sun itself hesitated to rise. Mist curled across Kuje like a white cloth laid gently on the village. The rooster crowed once, twice, then fell silent, as if even it understood the weight of the day. Folake rose before her mother called her. Her new clothes were folded neatly beside her tin box. Her hands trembled slightly as she tied her wrapper, her fingers unsure whether to hurry or to linger. Outside, her father stood by the doorway, his face calm but his eyes restless. The chief had sent a motorcycle to take her to the main road where the city bus would pass. It would be her first time riding one. To her, it looked like a creature of fire and noise, its metal body shining like a wet fish. The compound was full of neighbors. Some had come with gifts, roasted plantain, kola nuts, dried groundnuts, anything to say we love you, don't forget us. Others came only to see, to witness the moment Kuje sent one of its own into the unknown. Her mother's voice cut through the morning air, loud but trembling. Everybody, gather round. Let us pray for our daughter. The people circled Folake. Their heads bowed, their hands lifted. The chief's wife began a song, slow, deep, and full of blessing. Oloran Mojibie Omuwa. God, go with our child. The chorus swelled, and even the air seemed to hum with faith. Tears rolled down Folake's cheeks, though she tried to hide them. She felt the weight of every voice, every hope, pressing gently on her shoulders. When the prayers ended, her mother drew her into a fierce embrace. "My child," she whispered, "don't forget home. Don't forget your mother's God." Folake clung to her for a moment, breathing in the familiar scent of smoke, palm oil, and earth. Then her father stepped forward. He said nothing, just placed his rough palm on her head and nodded once. It was enough. The motorcycle roared to life, startling a few chickens that scurried across the yard. Folake climbed on behind the rider, clutching her tin box tightly. As the engine growled, she turned for one last look. Kuje looked smaller from here, mud huts, smoke rising from morning fires, the giant Iroko standing like a silent witness. Her parents stood side by side, waving slowly. Children ran behind, shouting her name. Dogs barked. And then the motorcycle began to move. The wind slapped her face. The trees blurred past. The world widened with every turn of the wheels. Her heart pounded, not from fear alone, but from the wild thrill of freedom. She wanted to cry and laugh at the same time. After an hour, they reached the main road, a long stretch of tar that cut through bush and farmland like a black river. Folake had never seen such a thing. It gleamed in the sunlight, hot and endless. "This is where you wait for the bus," the rider said, his voice lost in the engine's rumble. "It will come soon. The driver knows you." He helped her down, received his payment, and sped away. Folake stood alone, her tin box at her feet, staring at the strange road. The sound of insects and distant engines filled the air. For the first time, she felt the sharp sting of loneliness. Soon, a bus approached, a rickety old vehicle painted in fading blue and yellow, with "God is able" written boldly on the back. The conductor shouted destinations through the window. "City. City. Enter quick, oh." Folake climbed aboard, squeezing between strangers. The air smelled of sweat, petrol, and old cloth. The seat was torn in places, the metal beneath hot against her skin. As the bus groaned forward, the driver shouted something in Yoruba about "fasten your hats, not your seatbelts," and laughter rippled through the passengers. But Folake did not laugh. She was too busy watching the world pass by, trees giving way to farms, farms to shops, shops to streets lined with people and noise. When the first tall building appeared, she gasped softly. It looked like a mountain made of glass. The bus plunged deeper into the city, and Folake felt as though she had stepped into another world. Everything moved faster here, the people, the cars, even the wind. Nobody greeted anyone. Faces were hard, eyes sharp, mouths quick. "Not your first time for city?" the woman beside her asked with a smile. Folake nodded shyly. "Yes, ma." The woman chuckled. "You go learn quick. Just hold your bag well and no follow anybody way too friendly." By the time the bus stopped at the campus gate, Folake's heart was thundering. The signboard read, "College of Education, welcome to the City of Knowledge." She stepped down slowly, clutching her tin box. All around her, students in bright clothes laughed and hurried past. They spoke fast English and strange slang that twisted her tongue when she tried to repeat it. For a moment, she stood frozen, the sound of the city roaring around her. She thought of Kuje, the quiet river, the gentle evenings, her mother's hands. And she wondered, how will I survive here? But before the fear could grow too large, she heard a voice beside her. "Hey. Are you the girl from Kuje?" Folake turned. A tall, dark-skinned girl with short hair and bright eyes was smiling at her. She wore jeans and a t-shirt that said "Fearless." Her confidence radiated like sunlight. "Yes. I am Folake," she replied. "I'm Toshi," the girl said, grinning. "Come, I'll show you around. You look lost." And just like that, the city opened its arms, warm, dazzling, and dangerous. Folake picked up her box and followed Toshi into the crowd. She did not know it then, but that single step would change her life forever. The first thing Folake noticed about the city was the noise, a constant hum that never stopped. Even at night, when the sun had long buried its face, the city breathed and groaned like a restless giant. Cars honked endlessly, traders shouted prices into the wind, and music spilled from distant bars like drunken laughter. Kui had been a song of crickets and wind, the city was a drumline of chaos. Toshi walked ahead, her steps quick and confident, her bag slung casually over one shoulder. Folake trailed behind, clutching her tin box, her eyes wide with wonder and confusion. "Don't walk like that," Toshi called over her shoulder. "You'll make people know you're new." Folake blinked. "How?" Toshi laughed. "You're staring at everything like it's magic. This is just the city, my dear. You'll get used to it." They turned into a long street crowded with hostels and tiny shops. The smell of fried yam and exhaust fumes mingled in the air. Young men leaned on walls, whistling at passing girls. Others sold phone chargers, earrings, second-hand clothes. Everyone seemed to be selling or hurrying. Toshi stopped in front of a two-story building painted cream and brown. The signboard above the door read Victory Hostel for Ladies. "This is where we'll stay," she said, opening the gate. "You're lucky, the matron likes me." Folake followed her into a narrow courtyard surrounded by doors. Some were open, revealing small rooms cluttered with clothes, shoes, and books. The air smelled faintly of soap and body spray. Inside their room, two beds stood side by side, separated by a small table. A ceiling fan creaked lazily above. The walls were plastered with posters, music stars, slogans, and a few Bible verses. "You can take that bed," Toshi said, pointing to one near the window. "It's cooler at night." Folake nodded shyly. "Thank you." She set her tin box on the floor and sat, letting out a breath she didn't know she was holding. The city felt heavy around her, so many sounds, so many faces, so many unknown things. Toshi watched her with amusement. "So, Kui girl," she said teasingly, "is this your first time away from home?" Folake smiled faintly. "Yes. I have never left before." Toshi laughed again, shaking her head. "Oh, you'll see things here that will shock you. But don't worry, you have me. I'll teach you the ways of the city." Folake nodded, grateful and a little uncertain. That night, as she lay in her new bed, she could still hear the city's pulse outside, the chatter of girls in the hallway, the distant cry of a generator, the wail of sirens far away. Sleep came slowly, weighed down by thoughts of home. She missed her mother's soft singing, her father's quiet strength, the smell of the river. In her dreams, the village appeared again, the people waving and fading behind mist. She reached for them, but the sound of horns pulled her back to the city. Days turned into weeks. The college was bigger than she imagined, with buildings that seemed to touch the clouds. Classes were filled with voices that spoke fast, with accents that tangled her tongue. Some students laughed at the way she pronounced words, at her simple dresses, at her quietness. "Country girl," someone whispered once as she passed. Folake pretended not to hear, but the words cut deep. Toshi, however, fit in easily. She knew the right words, the right jokes, the right boys. Everyone seemed to know her. She wore bright clothes, braided her hair in styles that turned heads, and laughed loudly. "You need to blend in," Toshi told Folake one evening as they walked back to the hostel. "You can't keep wearing wrapper and slippers every day. You look like someone's auntie." "But I don't have money for new clothes," Folake said softly. Toshi shrugged. "Then find a way. In this city, you either shine or fade." Folake smiled faintly but said nothing. She was here to study, not to shine. But as days passed, she began to notice how others looked at her, how some girls avoided her simplicity, how some boys ignored her completely. Loneliness became a quiet ache that followed her everywhere. In the evenings, she sat by the window, watching the city lights blink like restless stars. Somewhere deep inside, she began to wonder if this was the price of her dream. Then came hunger. Her stipend from the village ran out faster than she expected. Books were expensive, food even more so. Sometimes she skipped meals, pretending to be busy. Other times she ate gari with no sugar, the taste of dryness filling her mouth. When Toshi noticed, she frowned. "You can't live like this. Are you waiting for angels to bring food?" Folake smiled weakly. "God will provide." Toshi rolled her eyes. "Yes, but even God helps those who help themselves." A few days later, Toshi returned from town with a new phone and new shoes. Folake stared in amazement. "Wow, you bought all this?" Toshi laughed softly. "No, a friend bought it for me." "What kind of friend?" Toshi's eyes glinted. "The kind who likes to spend money on girls who look good and smile right." Folake frowned, unsure what that meant, but something inside her stirred, a mix of curiosity and unease. That night, she prayed longer than usual. "God, please help me not to be tempted. Help me remember why I came here." But the city had its own rhythm, its own whispering voice. And slowly, without knowing, Folake began to listen. The semester moved on. Folake struggled, but she passed her courses. She learned to navigate the campus, to speak more confidently, even to smile more. Yet every time she passed a boutique window or a restaurant where students ate jollof and fried chicken, she felt the sharp edge of her difference. Toshi, meanwhile, grew busier, new clothes, new friends, new places. Sometimes she didn't come back to the hostel until morning. When Folake asked, she only smiled. "The city has many ways to survive. You'll understand soon." Folake didn't press further. She only prayed more. But prayer alone could not quiet the hunger or the longing to belong. And one evening, when everything would change, it began with something as simple as a borrowed dress. It was a Saturday evening, the kind of evening when the city air softened, filled with music, perfume, and laughter from unseen corners. The campus courtyard was alive with color. Students were dressing up for the Freshers' Night Party, an annual event everyone had been talking about since the semester began. Toshi stood before the mirror, twisting her waist as she applied red lipstick. The glow of the bulb bounced off her earrings. Her dress, tight, gold, and glittering, clung to her like light itself. "Are you not coming?" she asked, glancing at Folake, who sat on her bed, reading a small Bible by the weak yellow light. Folake shook her head. "No. I'll just stay here. I'm not used to parties." Toshi smirked. "You're not used to the city either, but here you are." Folake smiled faintly but didn't reply. Her stomach growled quietly, she hadn't eaten all day. There was only gari left in her tin box, and even that, she was saving for tomorrow. Toshi zipped her small bag, picked up her phone, then paused by the door. "You should come out sometimes, Folake. Life is not all prayer and lectures. You're too pretty to hide yourself." "I don't have a dress like yours," Folake murmured, eyes still on her Bible. Toshi turned back, her eyes softening. She rummaged through her things, then held up a simple sky blue gown. "Here," she said. "Try this. It'll fit you." Folake hesitated. "No, I can't wear your clothes." "Oh, stop that," Toshi said, laughing. "It's just a dress. You'll return it. I'm your friend, aren't I?" Folake's fingers trembled as she took the gown. The fabric was light, smooth, and smelled faintly of perfume. She looked at it for a long moment, her heart thudding. "Okay," she whispered. Minutes later, she stood before the mirror, hardly recognizing herself. The blue gown hugged her figure gently. Her braids fell neatly around her face. She wasn't glamorous like Toshi, but she looked different. beautiful in a way that frightened her. Toshi grinned. Oh. See, fine girl. I told you, the city just needs to see you once. Folake laughed nervously. But I don't even have shoes for this. Wear mine, Toshi said. Don't argue. And just like that, the night began. The party was a swirl of lights and sound. Music thumped through the hall, making the floor tremble. The air smelled of perfume, sweat, and sweet alcohol. Students danced, laughed, and shouted over the noise. Folake followed Toshi closely, feeling lost but trying not to show it. She had never seen so many people moving so freely, so boldly. The girls shimmered like stars, the boys moved with practiced charm. When she entered the room, heads turned. Toshi whispered into her ear, "You see? I told you. The bush girl from Kuje is gone. Tonight, you're one of us." Folake blushed. "Please, don't say that." But part of her liked hearing it. They sat at a table where drinks were passed freely. Folake refused at first, but when Toshi handed her a glass, saying it's just malt, she took a small sip. It was sweet, too sweet, but it made her chest warm. The night blurred into laughter, dancing, flashes of camera phones. For the first time since arriving in the city, Folake forgot her hunger, her worries, and even her loneliness. She felt light, free, like someone else entirely. Then came Bode. He was tall, dark, with an easy smile and a voice that carried like music. He was one of the senior students, dressed in a clean white shirt and the confidence of someone who knew his power. He approached their table, eyes fixed on her. "You're new here, right?" Folake looked down shyly. "Yes, sir." He laughed. "Don't call me sir. I'm Bode." Toshi leaned over. "She's my roommate." "Folake. First year." Bode smiled at her. "Nice name. You're from the east?" Folake shook her head. "No. From Kui Village." "Kuje," he repeated, pretending to think. "Oh, that must be far. No wonder you look peaceful. City girls don't look like that anymore." Folake blushed again, her hands gripping the edge of her chair. Toshi grinned, noticing the spark. "Bode, please help her find her way around campus. She's still learning." "With pleasure," Bode said, eyes never leaving Folake's face. When the party ended and the crowd spilled out into the night, the air was cooler. The moon hung over the campus like a silver lantern. Bode walked them back toward the hostel, talking easily about school, lecturers, and city life. Folake listened, half in awe, half in disbelief. He walked beside her, close enough for her to smell the faint scent of cologne. "You should smile more," he said suddenly. "You have a beautiful smile." Folake's cheeks burned. "Thank you," she whispered. At the hostel gate, he stopped. "Can I see you tomorrow?" "I don't know," she said, flustered. "Just for lunch," he added quickly. "Nothing serious. I promise." Before she could answer, Toshi laughed. "Of course she'll come. Won't you, Folake?" Bode smiled. "Good. Tomorrow then." He left, his perfume lingering in the night. Toshi turned to her friend, her eyes mischievous. "See? I told you. The city is not that scary. You just needed to shine a little." Folake looked down at her borrowed shoes, her borrowed dress, her borrowed courage. She smiled weakly, but inside, something trembled. That night, she could not sleep. Bode's smile haunted her. His words echoed softly, "You have a beautiful smile." She whispered into the darkness, "Lord, please, help me not to forget who I am." But deep in her heart, the city's shadow had already stretched its fingers toward her. And by morning, the line between gratitude and desire would blur in ways she never expected. The next afternoon, the campus was unusually bright. The air shimmered with heat, and the smell of fried snacks drifted from the roadside canteens. Students hurried across the walkways with files and laughter, their shadows long and sharp against the concrete. Folake stood outside her class, clutching a small notebook. She had dressed simply that day, a plain yellow blouse and skirt, but she still felt self-conscious. Toshi had teased her before leaving for a group meeting. "Oh, Kui girl, you're looking nervous," she said with a grin. "Don't faint when Bod smiles at you." "I'm not going anywhere," Folake replied, though her voice was soft, uncertain. Toshi raised an eyebrow. "You'll see him. I can feel it. City men don't forget girls like you." Toshi had been right. Around noon, as Folake sat on the steps outside the lecture hall, a shadow fell across her. She looked up, and there he was, Bod, in a crisp shirt and dark sunglasses, holding 2 bottles of soft drink. "Still reading?" he asked, smiling. "You never take a break, do you?" Folake's heart skipped. "I was just waiting for the next class." He handed her a bottle. "Then you can wait with me instead." At first, she refused, shaking her head. "No, thank you. I'm okay." But he insisted gently, and she accepted, her fingers brushing his for a second, a spark, brief but startling. They sat together on the steps, talking about her village, her dreams, and how strange the city felt. Bod listened with a kind of attention she had never known. His voice was calm, his laughter easy, and when he spoke her name, it sounded softer, almost like a secret. At first, she refused, shaking her head. "No, thank you. I'm okay." But he insisted gently, and she accepted, her fingers brushing his for a second, a spark, brief but startling. They sat together on the steps, talking about her village, her dreams, and how strange the city felt. Bod listened with a kind of attention she had never known. His voice was calm, his laughter easy, and when he spoke her name, it sounded softer, almost like a secret. From that day, their meetings became frequent, small, harmless moments, or so she told herself. They would sit under the mango tree near the library, share roasted corn by the roadside, or walk back to the hostel together. Sometimes, he gave her small things, a pen, a notebook, a bar of chocolate. "You study better when you're happy," he'd say. She always protested, "You shouldn't buy me things." And he would smile. "It's nothing. You deserve good things." But each gift, though small, tied her closer to him. Soon, other students noticed. Whispered jokes followed her in hallways. "No Bod's girl," someone murmured once as she passed. Folake's cheeks burned, but she said nothing. She told herself it wasn't true. Bod was just a friend. A kind senior helping her adjust. Yet even she couldn't deny the flutter in her chest when she saw him. Her roommate chuckled. "Relax. I'm just warning you. City love can taste sweet at first but turn bitter before you swallow." Folake thought about that for days. But when Bod appeared again, her doubts melted like mist in sunlight. One Friday evening, after lectures, he asked to take her out for food. "Nothing fancy," he said. "Just rice and chicken." "You've been skipping lunch again." Her stomach growled in betrayal, and she finally agreed. They went to a small eatery off campus, bright lights, loud music, and the smell of fried meat. Folake ate shyly, every movement delicate, afraid of looking greedy. Bod watched her with quiet amusement. "You act like eating is a sin." She smiled. "I'm just not used to it." "Then get used to it," he said softly. "You don't have to suffer to prove anything." When they left, it had started to rain, soft, gentle drops that painted the road silver. He took her hand to guide her through the puddles. She almost pulled away, but the warmth of his palm steadied her. For the first time in the city, she felt safe. He stopped at the gate of her hostel, rain dripping from his hair. "Can I walk you in?" "No," she said quickly, heart racing. "The matron doesn't like visitors." He smiled. "All right. Then good night, Miss Kui." "Good night." As she turned to leave, he called after her, "Folake." She looked back. He hesitated, then said, "Don't ever think you're alone here." Her breath caught. For a moment, the city around her, the rain, the lights, the endless noise, all faded into stillness. She nodded. "Thank you." But as the weeks passed, the cost of his attention began to show. She found herself waiting for him after class, thinking of him when she prayed, smiling at memories that had no reason to linger. She began to feel the quiet ache of dependence, the way her mood rose and fell with his presence. When he traveled one weekend without telling her, she spent the whole day restless. Toshi noticed. "See your face," Toshi said. "You're in deep already." "I'm not," Folake said, forcing a smile. But she was. That night, as she lay awake, she whispered the prayer she had begun to repeat too often. "God, please, help me not to fall." Yet, even as she said it, she knew she was already leaning too far over the edge. The mid-semester test came, and campus turned into a sea of tension. Students buried themselves in books, slept in lecture halls, and fought for seats in the library. Even Toshi, who was usually calm, began to pace their room at night, muttering formulas under her breath. But Folake was distracted. Her notebooks were open, her eyes fixed on the pages, yet her thoughts kept wandering. To Bode's voice. His smile. The way he always seemed to know when she was worried. He had started calling her in the evenings now. His number glowing on her small phone like a secret she both feared and loved. "Have you eaten?" he'd ask. "Not yet." "Then don't study until you do. You'll faint one day and make me look bad." She would laugh softly, not realizing how easily his words were becoming rules in her life. Sometimes, when she stayed late in the library, he came to walk her back. Once, he brought her a small umbrella. "For when I'm not around," he said, slipping it into her bag. The gesture was so simple, yet her heart carried it like a diamond. One evening, it rained heavily, thunder rolling through the sky like drums. The hostel generator had failed again, and the girls lit candles along the corridor. The air smelled of damp clothes and kerosene. Folake sat by her window, reading, when her phone buzzed. "Bode, where are you?" "Folake, in my room." "The light is out." "Bode, I'm nearby. Come to the faculty block. I brought food for you." She hesitated. The rain was fierce, but hunger gnawed at her. Toshi was already asleep, wrapped in a blanket, the candle flickering beside her. After a minute, Folake slipped on her sandals and took her umbrella. The walk was short but uneasy, the campus nearly empty, puddles glinting like glass in the lightning flashes. She found him under the building's overhang, holding a small nylon bag. "See," he smiled. "I told you I wouldn't let you starve." He led her inside to the dry corridor, and they sat on the bench. Inside the bag were 2 packs of rice and a drink. She smiled gratefully. "You didn't have to come all this way." "I wanted to." They ate quietly while rain hammered the roof above. It was the kind of silence that felt too full, too heavy with things unsaid. When she tried to stand up to leave, he reached for her wrist, gentle, not forceful, but enough to make her pause. "Stay a little," he said. "Bode. Just 5 minutes. Please." She sat back down, heart racing. They talked again, but the conversation drifted, from books to home to how lonely the campus felt at night. His voice grew lower, slower. "You're too good," he said softly. "You make me want to be better." She didn't know what to say. Her hands trembled slightly. He looked at her, eyes steady. "Do you trust me?" Folake nodded. That was the moment she later wished she had stayed silent. Because trust, once given, rarely comes back whole. He moved closer, his hand brushing her shoulder. The rain outside muffled the world. It was as if they were sealed away from everything else. Her mind screamed no, but her heart, confused, curious, young, stayed still. Then, somewhere between fear and affection, she made the mistake of not standing up fast enough. When she finally pulled away, her voice broke. I have to go. He didn't stop her this time. He just nodded, his expression unreadable. Folake ran through the rain, clutching her umbrella as tears mixed with the storm. She reached her hostel door trembling, her heart pounding like a trapped bird. Inside, the candle had died. The room was dark, except for the faint glow of lightning from outside. She sank onto her bed, wet clothes clinging to her, shame and confusion tightening her chest. She didn't know what to call what had just happened, a near mistake, a fall, or a warning. But one thing was certain, something had shifted. The next day, she avoided his calls. She couldn't bring herself to look at him in class. When she finally answered, his voice was calm, gentle as always. Are you angry with me? No, she whispered. You're sure? Yes. I just need to think. He paused. All right. But don't shut me out. You mean more to me than you think. That sentence tore at her. Because she wanted to believe him, even when she shouldn't. She deleted his number that night, twice. But by morning, she had saved it again. Weeks passed. She buried herself in studies, prayed longer, sang louder during fellowship. She smiled more than usual, as if pretending could erase memory. But Bode's shadow lingered. In the places they'd sat. The umbrella still in her bag. The echoes of a voice that once called her Miss Kui. One Sunday, after service, the pastor preached about Samson and Delilah, about strength lost in the lapse of affection and moments unguarded. Folake sat still, her heart sinking with every line. Some mistakes, the pastor said, don't announce themselves as sin. They come wearing care, attention, and soft hands. Folake felt tears burn behind her eyes. That night, she prayed with a broken heart. God, she whispered, please, give me the strength to walk away before it's too late. Outside, the night was silent again. But deep within her, she knew the storm wasn't over, only waiting. Morning came with a pale sky, washed out, almost empty. The rain had stopped, but the ground still carried the scent of it, thick and earthy. The world felt quiet, yet inside Folake's chest was a noise she could not silence. She went through the motions that day, class, notes, smiles, but it was all mechanical, hollow. Her laughter came delayed, her words clipped. Even Toshi noticed. You've been too quiet lately, Toshi said as they prepared for lectures. You and your city man fought. Folake's heart jumped. No, not really. Then what's wrong? Nothing. I'm just tired. Toshi studied her for a moment, then shrugged. Tired? Be careful before tiredness becomes sickness. Folake forced a small smile. I'll be fine. But she wasn't. Inside her, guilt gnawed like a slow flame. It wasn't just what had happened that rainy night, or what almost had. It was the realization that she had let her guard down, that she had allowed herself to drift so far from the girl who had knelt in her small village church, praying for guidance before coming to the city. She felt distant from herself. For days, she avoided Bode. When he came to her faculty, she left early. When he texted, she ignored it. But each message she didn't answer weighed on her like a stone. On the fourth day, he appeared outside her lecture hall. Folake, he said quietly, blocking her path. We need to talk. Her pulse raced. Bode, please, not here. He stepped aside but followed her to the courtyard, his voice low. You've been avoiding me. I just need space. Space for what? Did I do something wrong? She looked down. I don't know. Maybe we both did. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. You're overthinking again. Nothing happened, Folake. You're acting like we committed a crime. Her eyes welled up. It's not about that. It's about me. About what I feel. He softened. And what do you feel? She hesitated. The truth was tangled. She felt drawn, confused, ashamed all at once. I don't know, she whispered. But I don't like it. Bode exhaled slowly. All right. If you need space, take it. I'll wait. Then he left, walking away without looking back. Folake stood there for a long time, her hands trembling. That evening, she went to fellowship alone. The small hall was dimly lit, the worship soft and slow. The chorister sang a song about mercy, and something inside her broke. Tears slid down her face as she whispered, God, I'm sorry. It wasn't loud, but it was honest. The kind of prayer that doesn't need eloquence, only surrender. When she left the hall, her eyes were swollen but her heart was lighter, not healed, but breathing again. Weeks rolled into months. Exams approached, and life on campus returned to its normal rhythm. The noise of students, the smell of roasted maize, the endless chatter, all masking 1,000 small heartbreaks hidden in plain sight. Folake focused on her studies again. She began waking early, praying at dawn, reading her Bible under the faint blue light of morning. She no longer carried the umbrella Bode gave her. It sat quietly at the bottom of her box, untouched. Sometimes she still saw him across the faculty, at the cafe, or passing in his car. They exchanged polite nods, nothing more. But every time their eyes met, she felt a ghost of what once almost was. And then, one day, he was gone. Toshi mentioned it casually while eating suya. You hear say Bode don't graduate? Folake froze. He has. Yes, oh. I saw him at the car park yesterday. He said he's leaving for Abuja. You know Siam. Folake shook her head slowly. No. Something in her chest tightened, not sadness, exactly, but a quiet ache of finality. She whispered, almost to herself, then maybe it's for the best. That night, she wrote in her small notebook. Sometimes, losing someone is how God saves you from yourself. It doesn't always feel like mercy, but it is. She closed the notebook and smiled faintly. Her prayer that night was simple. Lord, thank you for pulling me back before I fell completely. Teach me to see my worth in you, not in who notices me. Outside, the moonlight spilled across the hostel wall like silver water. The night was still again, but this time, its silence didn't frighten her. It comforted her. Weeks later, she went home for the holidays. Her mother noticed the difference immediately. You look calmer, Mama said, stirring stew over the fire. City life didn't swallow you. Folake smiled. It tried. But God helped me. Her mother laughed softly. He always does. That night, as she lay on her small bed, the wind humming softly through the open window, Folake thought of all that had happened, the laughter, the guilt, the near fall, the redemption. She realized that not all lessons come from pain. Some come from the mercy that allows you to rise after it. And she promised herself that she would never again let loneliness disguise itself as love. The rain came again that night, gentle, rhythmic, cleansing. But this time, Folake didn't cry. She simply whispered into the darkness. Thank you for the silence after the rain. By the time the new semester began, Folake had changed, quietly, deeply, in ways only she could feel. She still smiled, still studied, still sat under the old mango tree outside the library, but there was something steadier about her now. The softness in her spirit hadn't vanished, it had simply been tempered by wisdom. The first weeks of lectures felt almost peaceful. The noise of the campus no longer overwhelmed her. She greeted people easily, laughed more with Toshi, and spent her evenings at fellowship, not out of guilt, but gratitude. When she prayed now, her words were not heavy or desperate. They flowed gently, like water. "Thank you," she often said, "for teaching me to see clearly." Even Toshi noticed. "You've been glowing lately," Toshi said one morning as they prepared for class. "No new cream, abi new peace." Folake laughed. "Peace, my sister. The kind only God can give." Toshi rolled her eyes playfully. "So you won't even gist me the full story of what happened with your city fine boy?" "There's nothing to gist," Folake said with a small smile. "God handled it." Toshi chuckled. "God they do break up counselor now, abi?" Folake grinned. "Something like that." They laughed together, and for the first time in a long while, the laughter came easily, unweighted by secrets or shame. One hot afternoon, after lectures, Folake went to the chapel for her usual quiet time. The chapel was almost empty, except for a few students scattered along the benches. The light through the stained glass painted the floor in soft colors, blue, gold, red. She knelt at the altar and closed her eyes. She wasn't asking for anything this time. Just thanking. It was there, in that silence, that she noticed the girl sitting 2 rows behind, her face buried in her hands, shoulders trembling. Folake hesitated at first, unsure whether to interrupt. But something in her heart urged her forward. She sat quietly beside the girl. "Hey," she said softly. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up. Her eyes were swollen, her voice trembling. I messed up." Folake's heart clenched. The girl couldn't have been more than 16 or 17, a fresher, just like she once was. "Do you want to talk about it?" Folake asked gently. The girl nodded, tears spilling. "I thought he loved me," she whispered. "He said he cared, but after, he just stopped talking to me." Folake didn't need to hear the rest. The story was too familiar. She placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Listen to me. You're not the first to fall, and you won't be the last. But this isn't the end. You can rise again." The girl sniffed. "But I feel dirty." Folake smiled sadly. "I did too once. But God doesn't throw us away because of our mistakes. Sometimes, He lets us break so He can rebuild us stronger." The girl looked at her, tears flowing. "Do you really believe that?" "I don't just believe it," Folake said softly. "I've lived it." They prayed together. The girl's sobs turned into quiet breaths. When she finally lifted her head, there was light in her eyes, small, fragile, but real. As Folake left the chapel that day, a gentle joy filled her heart. She realized that healing isn't complete until you use your scars to comfort someone else. That evening, she shared the experience with Toshi. "So you've turned counselor now?" Toshi teased. Folake smiled. "Maybe. But I think this is what I was meant to do." Toshi tilted her head. "You sound like a preacher." "Not yet," Folake said, laughing. "But maybe someday." As weeks passed, more students began coming to her, girls, mostly, drawn to the calmness in her voice and the quiet wisdom in her advice. She never judged, never lectured. She only listened, shared, and prayed. They began calling her Sister Folake, though she never asked for the title. Her reputation grew, not from perfection, but from authenticity. People could feel that she understood, because she had walked through the same fire. One evening, after fellowship, her campus pastor called her aside. "Sister Folake," he said kindly, "you have a gift. The way you comfort people, it's not ordinary." Have you thought of joining the counseling team? Folake hesitated, then smiled. Yes, sir. I'd love to. He nodded approvingly. Good. God is preparing you for something bigger. Keep your heart pure and your eyes fixed on Him. She bowed her head. I will, sir. Later that night, as she sat by her window, she took out her old notebook, the same one she had written in months ago, after Bod left. The pages were filled with prayers, verses, tears, and tiny victories. She flipped to the last entry and wrote, I used to think my story ended in regret. But now I see it was the beginning of grace. Pain taught me wisdom. Guilt taught me humility. And mercy taught me purpose. She closed the notebook and whispered, Thank you, Lord, for turning what could have destroyed me into something that helps others. Outside, the night was calm. The same moon that once witnessed her tears now shone on her smile. The rain had long passed, but its memory remained, not as sorrow, but as proof that storms don't last forever. Sometimes, they come only to wash the dust off the heart so the light can return. Folake stood on the chapel stage, speaking to a hall full of new students. Her voice was steady, her eyes bright. I know many of you are far from home, she said. The city will try to shape you. But remember who you are. Remember who sent you here. Don't let loneliness make you forget your worth. In the front row, the young girl from the chapel months ago smiled up at her, now stronger, radiant. Folake smiled back. When she finished her speech, the hall broke into applause. But Folake only bowed her head and whispered quietly to herself, All glory to you. And somewhere deep in her heart, she knew she had finally become the woman she prayed to be the day she first arrived at the university gates. The girl who almost fell had learned to stand. And now, she was helping others do the same.